Muscle Shoals, Alabama. February 1964, 2 o'clock in the morning. The studio was supposed to be empty by midnight, but Marvin Gaye was still there, sitting in the corner of the control room, watching a guitar player he didn't know set up his equipment. Through the thick glass window, the main recording space glowed amber and dim, filled with shadows that accumulated in places where people made music while the world slept. The engineer had gone for coffee. The producer had left hours ago, citing an early meeting everyone knew was an excuse. It was just the two of them now, and the silence felt deliberate, like both men were waiting for the other to speak first. Marvin had been in Muscle Shoals 3 days, recording outside Motown's Detroit headquarters for the first time. Berry Gordy didn't know he was here. This was Marvin's secret experiment, his attempt to find a sound that wasn't filtered through Motown's machinery, but so far he'd recorded nothing. Bobby Womack was 20 years old, but he moved like someone carrying the weight of 40. He tuned his guitar with mechanical precision, each string adjustment slow and careful, his fingers moving across the frets without looking. Marvin watched him from across the room, his eyes tracing the way Bobby's hands trembled slightly, even when they were trying to be steady. Marvin knew who Bobby Womack was. Everyone in the music world knew. 3 months ago, Sam Cooke had died, shot in a Los Angeles motel under circumstances that made no sense. The official story was self-defense, but anyone who knew Sam found that impossible to believe. Sam Cooke, with charm that could disarm anyone, who never raised his voice in anger, dead at 33 in a cheap motel. The details didn't add up. 2 months later, Bobby Womack married Sam's widow, Barbara. The music community turned on him instantly. Betrayal, disrespect, a vulture picking at a legend's bones. Marvin had heard the talk. Bobby Womack's name had become shorthand for everything wrong with the industry. But Marvin had also heard Sam Cooke sing "A Change Is Gonna Come" live before it was recorded, and that sound had changed something in him permanently. Sam showed Marvin that soul music could be more than love songs. It could carry weight. When Sam died, Marvin felt like he'd lost a roadmap he hadn't known he was following. But Marvin didn't say any of this. He just watched Bobby tune his guitar, and after 10 full minutes of silence, he finally spoke. "Sam meant something to you." It wasn't a question. Bobby's hands stopped moving. He didn't look up from the guitar, but his shoulders tensed in a way that told Marvin the words had landed exactly where they were meant to. "Why are you asking me that?" Bobby's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Marvin stood up slowly, walked to the window, looked out at the empty Alabama street. "Because Sam Cooke was my hero, and you're sitting here with his guitar, playing his notes, living his life." Bobby finally looked up, and for the first time, Marvin saw his face clearly. Young, exhausted, eyes red from lack of sleep, or maybe from crying, it was hard to tell. "I'm not living his life," Bobby said. "I'm trying to survive mine." The words hung in the air between them. Marvin turned away from the window, walked toward the vocal booth, then stopped. He didn't know why he was pushing this. Maybe because he needed to understand something that didn't make sense. Maybe because Sam's death had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. Or maybe because he saw something in Bobby Womack's eyes that looked like the thing Marvin saw in his own mirror every morning. Guilt, the kind that doesn't go away. "Show me," Marvin said quietly. "Show me how you play Sam's guitar." Bobby's jaw tightened. "This isn't Sam's guitar. This is mine." "Then show me yours." Bobby looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable passing across his face, then nodded once. He repositioned the guitar in his lap, adjusted the strap, closed his eyes, and took a breath that Marvin could see even from across the room. Then he started playing the opening notes of "Bring It On Home to Me." But it wasn't Sam's version. The notes were angrier, more aggressive, like Bobby was fighting the guitar instead of playing it. Every chord sounded like an accusation, every progression like a defense he was mounting against an invisible jury. Where Sam's version had been pleading, Bobby's was defiant. Where Sam's had been smooth, Bobby's was raw. The guitar strings seemed to cut into his fingers, and Bobby played harder, faster, pushing the instrument past where it wanted to go, forcing it into shapes it wasn't meant to hold. Marvin listened with his eyes closed, and he could hear everything Bobby wasn't saying. The grief, the guilt, the rage at a world that had taken Sam and then turned on Bobby for trying to honor what Sam had asked of him. The music was defensive and desperate, and when the last note faded, it left a ringing in the studio that sounded like an alarm nobody knew how to turn off. Marvin opened his eyes slowly and looked at Bobby, who was still gripping the guitar like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "That's not Sam's sound," Marvin said. "That's your anger." Bobby set the guitar down carefully, like it might break if he wasn't gentle. "You don't know anything about my anger. I know what it sounds like." The studio fell silent again. Bobby stared at the floor, his hands still resting on the guitar's body, fingers tapping a rhythm that only he could hear. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. "Everyone thinks I betrayed him," Bobby said. "Married his wife, moved into his house, took his place, but they don't know what Sam told me." Marvin didn't respond. He just waited. "3 days before he died," Bobby continued, "Sam pulled me aside after a show. We were in Chicago. He looked tired, more tired than I'd ever seen him. And he said, 'Bobby, if something happens to me, you take care of Barbara and the kids. You understand? You take care of them.'" Bobby's voice cracked on the last word. He cleared his throat, looked up at the ceiling, blinked several times. "I didn't think he meant it," Bobby said. "I thought he was just talking. You know how Sam was, always dramatic, always performing. But then he was gone, and Barbara was alone with 3 kids and no money because Sam's business manager had stolen everything. And I remembered what he told me, so I did what he asked." Marvin walked slowly toward the piano in the corner of the studio, sat down on the bench, his back to Bobby. He placed his hands on the keys but didn't press any of them. He thought about Sam Cooke, about the voice that had shown him what soul music could be, about the man who had crossed over into the white mainstream without losing his blackness, who had built his own record label, who had died at 33 with everything still ahead of him. "You loved her," Marvin said quietly. "Barbara." Bobby didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was barely audible. "I didn't at first. I married her because Sam asked me to protect her. But yeah, later, I did." Marvin turned on the piano bench, looked at Bobby directly. "And everyone hates you for it. Everyone hates me for it." The engineer came back with coffee, saw the two of them sitting in the dimly lit studio, felt the weight of whatever had been happening, and quietly left the coffee on the console before disappearing again. Neither Marvin nor Bobby moved to drink it. "You want to know something?" Marvin said after a long silence. "I don't think you betrayed Sam. I think you're carrying him, and that's heavier than betrayal." Bobby looked up, surprised. It was the first time someone in the music world had said anything to him that wasn't an accusation. "Sam's in everything you play," Marvin continued. "Every note, every rhythm. You're not trying to replace him. You're trying to keep him alive. And it's killing you." Bobby's hands started shaking again. He gripped the guitar tighter to steady them. "I can't stop playing," Bobby said, "because if I stop, he disappears. And if he disappears, then what was all of this for? What was his death for? What's my guilt for?" Marvin stood up from the piano, walked to the vocal booth, picked up the headphones, held them for a moment, then set them back down. He turned to Bobby. "Let's record something," Marvin said. "Not Sam's song, not my song. Something new, just guitar and voice. No production, no Motown formula, no Muscle Shoals sound. Just 2 people who love Sam Cooke trying to figure out how to move forward without him." Bobby looked uncertain. "I don't know if I can do that." "Neither do I," Marvin said. "But we're here. It's 2 in the morning, and nobody's watching." Bobby picked up his guitar again, this time holding it differently, softer, like it wasn't a weapon anymore. He started playing a slow, simple progression, just 4 chords repeating, but this time they weren't fighting. They were searching. Marvin stepped into the vocal booth, the door sealing behind him with a soft hiss. He put on the headphones, and Bobby's guitar filled his ears, close and intimate. Marvin started humming. No words at first, just sounds finding their way out without permission. His voice moved through the spaces between Bobby's chords, searching for melody in the gaps, in the silences. The 2 sounds wove together, separated, came back. After a few minutes, words came. Marvin didn't know where from. Maybe they'd been sitting in his chest for months. Maybe they were for Sam, maybe for Bobby, maybe for himself. A change is gonna come, Marvin sang quietly, borrowing Sam's words but making them his own, his voice soft and vulnerable, in a way it rarely was on Motown recordings. Oh yes, it will, Bobby's guitar responded, weaving around Marvin's voice, supporting it without overwhelming it. They played for 20 minutes straight, maybe longer, time dissolving the way it did when music stopped being performance and became something closer to prayer. No stops, no retakes. Just two men searching for something neither could name, finding it in moments, losing it, finding it again. When they finally stopped, the studio was completely silent except for the low hum of the equipment. The engineer, who had been listening from the hallway, came back in. "Should I save that?" Marvin looked at Bobby. Bobby looked at Marvin. "No," they both said at the same time. The engineer nodded, understanding without needing explanation, and erased the tape. Marvin took off the headphones, stepped out of the booth. Bobby set his guitar down. They stood facing each other in the middle of the studio, two men who had just shared something that couldn't be captured or sold or explained. "You're not Sam's ghost," Marvin said. "You're Bobby Womack." Bobby nodded slowly. "And you're not trying to be Sam either." "No," Marvin said. "I'm trying to be what comes after Sam." They didn't shake hands. They didn't hug. They just stood there for a moment, acknowledging something that had shifted. Then Bobby packed up his guitar, and Marvin gathered his coat, and they left the studio separately, the way they'd come in. Marvin never recorded at Muscle Shoals again. Bobby never spoke publicly about that night. The tape was erased, lost to history, and the world never knew that two of soul music's most important voices had spent a February night in Alabama trying to make peace with a ghost. But the absence of the recording didn't mean the night disappeared. In the months that followed, when Berry Gordy told Marvin what to sing and how to sing it, Marvin started saying no. When producers tried to shape his sound, Marvin remembered Bobby Womack playing guitar with trembling hands, carrying a dead man's legacy. And Marvin understood that carrying someone else's expectations would kill him just as surely. Bobby carried it too. The anger in his playing softened. Not completely, not overnight. But gradually he started playing for himself instead of for Sam's ghost. He stopped trying to prove he deserved to exist in the space Sam had left behind. He just existed. Years later, in 1982, during an interview Bobby Womack rarely gave, a journalist asked him about Sam Cooke's influence on his music. Bobby was quiet for a long time before answering. "There was a night," he said slowly, "when I thought carrying Sam's legacy would crush me. And then someone showed me that I wasn't carrying Sam. I was carrying myself. And that's when I finally started to play my own music." The journalist asked who that someone was. Bobby just smiled and said, "Someone who understood ghosts." Marvin Gaye never mentioned that night either. But in the months that followed, something shifted in his music. He started pushing back against Motown's control, demanding the right to produce his own records, insisting that artists could be more than performers. He wanted autonomy. He wanted to own his sound. And maybe in that dark Alabama studio, watching Bobby Womack try to separate himself from Sam Cooke's shadow, Marvin had learned what it meant to stop living in someone else's image and start creating your own. The ghost of Sam Cooke never left either of them, but after that night they carried him differently. Not as a burden, not as a replacement, but as a foundation on which to build something new. And in the space between Bobby's guitar and Marvin's voice, in that erased recording that no one would ever hear, there was a moment where two men stopped competing with the past and started making peace with the future. That was the night the ghost stopped haunting them, and the music finally became their own.